The house was too quiet. That was the first thing Clara noticed every morning when she opened her eyes. For 43 years, she had woken up to the sound of her husband humming in the kitchen, the smell of coffee filling the air, and the soft creak of the wooden floors as he moved around preparing breakfast. But now, there was nothing. Just silence. A heavy, painful silence that wrapped around her like a blanket she never asked for. Clara was 72 years old. She had spent most of her life teaching children how to play the piano. For 4 decades, her small house had been filled with the sound of music. Students would come and go, their tiny fingers stumbling over the keys at first, then growing confident and strong as the months passed. She had taught hundreds of children over the years. Some of them went on to become professional musicians. Others simply learned to love music and carried that love with them into their adult lives. Either way, Clara felt proud. She had given them something beautiful, something that would stay with them forever. But now, at 72, Clara had stopped teaching. She had stopped playing. She had stopped doing almost everything that once brought her joy. It had been 8 months since her husband passed away. His name was Theodore, but everyone called him Teddy. They had been married for 48 years. They met when Clara was just 23, a young woman fresh out of music school with big dreams and a heart full of hope. Teddy was a carpenter. He didn't know anything about music, but he loved the way Clara's face lit up when she played. He said it was like watching someone come alive. He used to sit in the corner of the room during her lessons, pretending to read the newspaper, but really just listening to her teach. He never got tired of it. When Teddy got sick, Clara took care of him. She stopped teaching so she could be by his side every moment. She didn't mind. After everything he had given her, it was the least she could do. For 2 years, she watched him grow weaker. She held his hand through the hard days and the harder nights, and when he finally closed his eyes for the last time, a part of Clara closed with him. Now, she spent most of her days sitting in the living room, staring at the walls. The house felt too big without him. Every room held a memory. The kitchen where he used to make her pancakes on Sunday mornings. The garden where he grew tomatoes and sunflowers because he knew they were her favorites. The bedroom where they had shared thousands of conversations, thousands of laughs, thousands of quiet moments that meant more than words could ever say. And then there was the piano. It sat in the corner of the living room, right where it had always been. A beautiful grand piano, dark and shining, with keys that had been touched by so many hands over the years. Teddy had bought it for her as a wedding gift. He had saved for 3 years to afford it. When he surprised her with it on their first anniversary, Clara had cried so hard she couldn't speak. It was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given her. For decades, that piano had been the heart of their home. Clara would play in the mornings while Teddy drank his coffee. She would play in the evenings while he read his books. She would play on holidays, on birthdays, on ordinary days that somehow felt special because of the music. The piano had witnessed their entire life together. It had seen their joys and their struggles, their celebrations and their sorrows. It was more than just an instrument. It was a member of the family. But now, Clara couldn't bring herself to touch it. Every time she looked at the piano, she thought of Teddy. She thought of all the times he had sat beside her on the bench, pretending he wanted to learn, but really just wanting to be close to her. She thought of the way he used to close his eyes when she played something soft and slow. A small smile on his face, completely at peace. She thought of their last anniversary, just a few months before he got too sick to leave the bed, when she had played his favorite song, and he had taken her hand and said, "Thank you for filling my life with music." The memory was too painful. So Clara kept the piano closed. She covered it with a white cloth, as if hiding it from sight would somehow make the pain go away. But it didn't. The piano was still there, silent and waiting. Like a friend she had abandoned. Her children worried about her. She had 2 daughters, both grown now with families of their own. They called her every day, visited when they could, and tried their best to pull her out of her sadness. But Clara knew they had their own lives to live. She didn't want to be a burden. So she told them she was fine, even when she wasn't. She told them she was keeping busy, even when she spent most of her time doing nothing at all. One evening, her oldest daughter came to visit. She looked around the quiet house, at the covered piano, at the empty coffee cups piled in the sink, at the sadness in her mother's eyes. She sat down beside Clara and took her hand. "Mom," she said gently, "maybe it's time to think about selling the piano." Clara looked at her daughter, surprised. "Sell it? Sell it? It's just sitting there," her daughter said. "You don't play anymore. It takes up so much space. Maybe someone else could use it. Someone who would actually play it." Clara didn't know what to say. She understood her daughter's logic. The piano was large and expensive to maintain. It needed to be tuned regularly, and Clara hadn't done that in over a year. From a practical standpoint, selling it made sense, but the thought of letting it go felt like losing Teddy all over again. "I can't," Clara whispered. "Not yet." Her daughter sighed but didn't push further. She kissed Clara on the forehead and left, promising to call the next day. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the piano. She thought about all the years it had been a part of her life. She thought about all the students who had learned to play on those keys, all the songs she had performed, all the memories she had made. She thought about Teddy, and how much he had loved listening to her play. And then, for the first time in months, she felt something stir inside her. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was more like a tiny spark, a small flame that hadn't quite gone out. She didn't know what it meant, or where it would lead, but somewhere deep in her heart, she felt that the piano's story wasn't over yet. There was still something left to happen. Something she couldn't see or understand. She just had to be patient and wait. Outside her window, the rain began to fall. Clara closed her eyes and listened to the sound of the drops against the glass. It was almost like music, she thought. Soft and steady, like a lullaby. And for the first time in a long while, she fell asleep without crying. The piano sat in the corner, still and silent, covered in white cloth. But somehow, even in the darkness, it seemed to be waiting. Waiting for something. Waiting for someone. Waiting for a second chance to touch hearts once again. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Clara remembered the day clearly because it had been raining hard since morning. The kind of rain that made the sky look gray and heavy. The kind that kept people inside their homes with warm cups of tea and thick blankets. Clara was sitting by the window, watching the water run down the glass in little rivers, when she noticed something moving in her front yard. At first, she thought it was a stray cat. The neighborhood had a few of them, and they often came into her yard looking for shelter or food. But when she looked closer, she realized it wasn't an animal at all. It was a child, a young boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, standing under the old oak tree near her porch, trying to stay dry. Clara watched him for a moment. He was thin, with messy brown hair that was already soaked from the rain. He wore a jacket that looked too big for him, and his shoes were covered in mud. He kept looking around, as if he wasn't sure where to go or what to do. There was something in the way he stood, something in the way he hugged his arms around himself, that made Clara's heart ache. She didn't think about it. She just acted. She got up from her chair, walked to the front door, and opened it. "Hey there," she called out. "You're going to catch a cold standing out in this weather. Why don't you come inside for a bit?" The boy looked at her with wide eyes. He seemed surprised that someone had noticed him, surprised that someone cared enough to speak. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he walked toward the porch. "I didn't mean to bother you," he said quietly. His voice was soft, almost shy. "I was just waiting for the rain to stop." "You're not bothering me," Clara said with a gentle smile. "Come in. I'll make you some hot cocoa." The boy hesitated at the doorway, as if he wasn't sure whether he should trust her. Clara understood. She had taught enough children over the years to know that trust wasn't something everyone gave easily. Some kids had been through things that made them careful, made them guard their hearts like precious treasures. This boy had that look about him. The look of someone who had learned to be cautious. "It's okay," Clara said softly. "I used to be a teacher. I've had hundreds of kids in this house over the years. You're safe here." Something in her words seemed to reach him. He nodded slowly and stepped inside. Clara led him to the kitchen and started warming some milk on the stove. The boy sat at the table, his eyes moving around the room, taking everything in. He looked at the old photographs on the walls, the flowers in the vase by the window, the stack of books on the counter. He seemed fascinated by everything, as if he had never been inside a house like this before. "What's your name?" Clara asked as she stirred the cocoa. "Henry," he said. "That's a nice name. I'm Clara. Do you live around here, Henry?" The boy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I live at the group home, the one on Maple Street." Clara knew the place. It was a home for children who didn't have families to take care of them. Kids who had been through difficult situations and needed somewhere safe to stay. Her heart tightened at the thought of this small boy living there, without parents, without a real home to call his own. "I see," she said gently. She didn't ask any more questions. She didn't want to make him uncomfortable. Instead, she poured the hot cocoa into a mug and set it in front of him. "Here you go. Careful, it's hot." Henry wrapped his hands around the mug and took a small sip. A tiny smile appeared on his face. The first one Clara had seen. "It's good," he said. "My husband used to say I made the best hot cocoa in the whole town," Clara said, sitting down across from him. He was probably just being nice, but I liked hearing it anyway. Henry looked at her. "Where is your husband?" The question caught Clara off guard. She paused, feeling that familiar ache in her chest. "He passed away," she said quietly. "About 8 months ago." "I'm sorry," Henry said. And the way he said it, so simple and sincere, made Clara believe he truly meant it. There was no awkwardness in his voice, no discomfort, just honest sympathy from a child who probably understood loss better than most. "Thank you," Clara said. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain outside. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with words. Clara found herself feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of connection, a sense of not being completely alone. After finishing his cocoa, Henry got up to leave. But as he walked through the living room toward the front door, he suddenly stopped. Clara watched as his eyes fell on something in the corner of the room. The piano. It was still covered with the white cloth, but its shape was unmistakable. Henry stood frozen, staring at it like he had just discovered a hidden treasure. "What is that?" he asked, even though Clara was sure he already knew. "It's a piano," she said. "A real one?" Clara almost smiled at the wonder in his voice. "Yes, a real one. A grand piano." Henry took a step closer. "I've never seen one up close before. Only in movies and stuff." He turned to look at her, his eyes wide and hopeful. "Can I see it? Please?" Clara hesitated. She hadn't touched the piano in months. She hadn't even looked at it properly. Every time she passed by it, she turned her head away, afraid of the memories it would bring. But there was something in Henry's face, something so pure and eager, that she couldn't say no. "All right," she said quietly. "Let me show you." She walked over to the piano and slowly pulled off the white cloth. The instrument gleamed underneath, dark and beautiful, its keys still perfectly white and black. Henry let out a small gasp. "It's so pretty," he whispered. Clara looked at the piano, really looked at it, for the first time in 8 months. And yes, it was pretty. It was more than pretty. It was magnificent. She had forgotten how beautiful it was, how much care and craftsmanship had gone into making it. "Can I touch it?" Henry asked. Clara nodded. Henry reached out and pressed a single key. A clear, bright note rang out through the room, filling the silence that had been there for so long. The sound was pure and perfect, like a drop of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Henry's face lit up. "I did that," he said, amazed. "I made that sound." Clara felt something crack open inside her chest. It wasn't painful. It was more like a door opening, letting in fresh air after being locked shut for too long. She watched Henry press another key, then another, his small fingers exploring the piano with innocent curiosity. And then, without planning to, without even thinking about it, Clara sat down on the bench beside him. "Here," she said, guiding his hand. "Put your fingers like this, and press down gently." Henry did as she said, and a simple chord filled the room. "That's beautiful," he breathed. Clara smiled. A real smile. The first one in months. "That's just the beginning," she said. "There's so much more I can teach you, if you want to learn." Henry looked at her with those wide, hopeful eyes. "Really? You would teach me?" Clara didn't know why she said yes. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe it was the way Henry reminded her of all the students she used to have, all the young hearts she used to fill with music. Or maybe it was the piano itself, calling out to her, asking her not to give up just yet. "Yes," she said, "I would." Outside, the rain began to slow. A thin ray of sunlight broke through the clouds and streamed through the window, landing softly on the piano keys. Clara looked at it and felt, for the first time in a long while, that maybe the silence in her house was finally about to end. The lessons began the very next week. Henry showed up at Clara's door on Saturday morning, his hair combed neatly and his shoes cleaned of mud. He looked nervous, like a student on the first day of school, but there was excitement in his eyes that he couldn't hide. Clara welcomed him in with a warm smile and led him straight to the piano. That first real lesson was simple. Clara taught him how to sit properly on the bench, how to position his hands over the keys, and how to find middle C. Henry listened carefully to every word she said. His forehead wrinkled in concentration. When he finally played his first scale, it was clumsy and uneven. But he grinned like he had just won a prize. "I did it," he said proudly. "You did," Clara replied, "and it's only going to get better from here." From that day on, Henry came to Clara's house every Saturday and Sunday. The group home allowed it as long as he was back before dinner. Clara spoke to the supervisor there, a kind woman who seemed relieved that Henry had found something positive to focus on. She told Clara that Henry had always been a quiet boy, keeping to himself, never really connecting with the other children. But lately, she said, he seemed different, lighter, happier. Clara understood why. She felt it too. Teaching Henry brought something back to life inside her. For months, she had been walking through her days like a ghost, going through the motions without really living. But now, she had a reason to get out of bed in the morning. She had someone to prepare for, someone to share her knowledge with, someone who actually needed her. It was a small thing, maybe, but it meant everything. The weeks turned into months, and Henry's progress was remarkable. He had a natural gift for music that Clara had rarely seen in her 40 years of teaching. Most students took a long time to understand rhythm and melody, but Henry seemed to feel it instinctively. He didn't just play the notes, he understood them. He knew when to press harder and when to go soft, when to speed up and when to slow down. It was like the music lived inside him and was just waiting for a way to come out. But what impressed Clara most wasn't his talent. It was his heart. One afternoon, after finishing a difficult piece, Henry turned to her and asked, "Why does music make people cry?" "Try." Clara thought about it for a moment. "Because music speaks to the parts of us that words can't reach," she said. "It touches our deepest feelings, our joys, our sorrows, our memories. Sometimes a single melody can remind us of something we thought we had forgotten." Henry nodded slowly, as if her words had unlocked something in his mind. "When I play," he said quietly, "I think about my mom." Clara's heart tightened. Henry had never spoken about his mother before. She didn't know the full story, only that he had ended up in the group home because his family situation had fallen apart. She had never asked because she didn't want to push him. But now, he was opening up on his own. "Tell me about her," Clara said gently. Henry stared at the piano keys. She used to sing to me when I was little. Before everything got bad. She had a nice voice. I don't remember the songs, but I remember how they made me feel. Safe. Like nothing could hurt me. He paused. When I play the piano, it feels kind of like that. Like I'm back in that safe place again. Clara reached over and placed her hand on his. That's what music is supposed to do, she said. It's supposed to make us feel things. Good things, sad things, everything in between. And the fact that you can feel all of that at your age means you have a very special gift, Henry. He looked up at her, his eyes wet but not crying. Do you think she would be proud of me? If she could see me now? Clara didn't hesitate. I know she would be. As the months passed, Clara and Henry grew closer. Their relationship was no longer just teacher and student. It was something deeper. Clara began to think of him as the grandson she never had. She looked forward to his visits more than anything else in her life. She started cooking again, making sandwiches and cookies for their lessons. She started tending her garden again, planting flowers so the house would look nice when he arrived. She even started playing the piano on her own, practicing pieces she wanted to teach him, rediscovering the joy she thought she had lost forever. Her daughters noticed the change. When they visited, they found their mother smiling, laughing, full of energy. The house was no longer silent and sad. It was alive again, filled with the sound of music and conversation. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but they were grateful for it. Who is this boy? Her younger daughter asked one evening. He's turned you into a new person, Clara smiled. He hasn't turned me into a new person, she said. He's helped me remember who I used to be. See, Henry, too, was changing. The supervisors at the group home said he was doing better in school. He was talking more, making friends, even helping the younger kids with their homework. The quiet, guarded boy who used to hide in corners was slowly becoming someone confident and open. Music had given him something to be proud of, something that was entirely his own. One day, Clara decided to give him a challenge. She handed him a piece of sheet music, a beautiful but complicated melody that she had played at her very first recital as a young woman. This is advanced, she warned him. It might take you a few weeks to learn. Henry looked at the notes with wide eyes. It looks hard. It is hard, Clara admitted. But I believe you can do it. And when you're ready, I want you to perform it. Not just for me, but for other people too. Henry looked nervous. Like a concert? Something like that. The community center downtown has a small recital every spring for young musicians. I think you should sign up. Henry shook his head quickly. I can't play in front of people. What if I mess up? What if they laugh at me? Clara sat beside him on the bench and put an arm around his shoulder. Let me tell you something, she said. When I was your age, I was terrified of performing. My hands would shake. My heart would pound. And I was sure I would forget every note. But my teacher told me something that I never forgot. She said, the audience isn't there to judge you. They're there to feel something. If you play with your heart, they will feel your heart. And that's all that matters. Henry listened quietly, taking in her words. You have a gift, Clara continued. And gifts are meant to be shared, not hidden away. I know it's scary, but I also know you can do it. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Henry looked at the sheet music again. Then he looked at Clara. And slowly, a small smile spread across his face. Okay, he said. I'll try. Clara hugged him tight. That's all I ask. That night, after Henry left, Clara sat alone at the piano. She played softly, letting her fingers move across the keys without thinking. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the heavy silence of loneliness, but the peaceful stillness of contentment. She thought about Teddy and how much he would have loved Henry. She thought about all the students she had taught over the years, and how none of them had touched her heart quite like this boy. She thought about the strange and wonderful way life worked sometimes, bringing people together when they needed each other most. And she smiled, knowing that the best was yet to come. The spring recital was only 3 weeks away. Henry practiced every single day, sometimes at Clara's house, sometimes at the group home on an old keyboard the supervisors had found for him. He was determined to make Clara proud. He was determined to prove to himself that he could do something brave, something that mattered. Clara watched his dedication with a full heart. She had never seen a student work so hard. Every time he made a mistake, he didn't get frustrated. He just took a deep breath and started again. Every time he hit a difficult section, he didn't give up. He slowed down, practiced it piece by piece, and kept going until he got it right. His discipline was beyond his years, and Clara knew it came from something deep inside him. A need to succeed. A need to show the world that he was worth something. One Sunday afternoon, Henry played the entire piece from start to finish, without a single mistake. When he finished, he turned to Clara with a nervous smile. "Was it okay?" he asked. Clara had tears in her eyes. "It was more than okay," she said. "It was beautiful." Henry's smile grew wider. For a moment, he looked like the happiest child in the world, and Clara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real, solid hope that everything was going to be all right. But life doesn't always follow the plans we make. It was a Tuesday evening when Clara got the phone call. She was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, humming one of Teddy's favorite songs. When the phone rang, she picked it up and heard the voice of the supervisor from the group home. "Mrs. Clara," the woman said, "I'm calling because there's something you need to know." "About Henry." Clara's stomach dropped. "Is he okay? Is he hurt?" No, he's fine. He's healthy. But there's been a development." The woman paused, and Clara could hear the hesitation in her voice. "A foster family has been found for him. They've agreed to take him in." For a moment, Clara felt relief. A foster family was good news, wasn't it? It meant Henry would have a real home, real parents, a chance at a normal life. But then the supervisor continued. "The family lives about 3 hours away, in another town. Henry will have to move there by the end of the month." The words hit Clara like a punch to the chest. 3 hours away. End of the month. That was less than 3 weeks. That was before the recital. "I see," Clara whispered. She didn't know what else to say. "I know this is sudden," the supervisor said gently. "And I know how much Henry means to you. But this is a good opportunity for him. The family seems kind, and they're excited to welcome him." "It's what we've been hoping for." Clara understood. She really did. Henry deserved a family. He deserved parents who would love him and take care of him. She had no right to stand in the way of that. But the thought of losing him, of never seeing him again, was almost too much to bear. "Does Henry know?" she asked. "We told him this morning. He's taking it hard. He asked if he could see you." "Of course," Clara said. "Send him over. I'll be here." An hour later, Henry appeared at her door. His eyes were red, and his face was pale. He walked inside without saying a word, and sat down on the couch, staring at the floor. Clara sat beside him. She didn't speak right away. She just let the silence hold them both, giving him space to feel whatever he needed to feel. Finally, Henry spoke. "They said I'm leaving." "I know," Clara said softly. "I don't want to go." His voice cracked. "I don't want to leave you. I don't want to leave the piano. This is the only place that's ever felt like home." Clara's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She reached over and pulled him into a hug, holding him tight like she used to hold her own daughters when they were small and scared. "I know it hurts," she said. "I know this feels like the end of everything. But listen to me, Henry. This isn't the end. It's just a new beginning." 2. Henry shook his head against her shoulder. "But what about the recital? I worked so hard. I wanted to play for you. I wanted to make you proud." "You've already made me proud," Clara said. "More than you'll ever know. You don't need a recital to prove anything to me. You've already proven everything." Henry pulled back and looked at her with wet eyes. "Will I ever see you again?" Clara took his hands in hers. "I don't know what the future holds," she said honestly. "But I do know this. The things we've shared, the music, the lessons, the time we've spent together, that doesn't disappear just because we're apart. It stays with us. It becomes a part of who we are. No matter where you go, no matter how far away, you'll carry that with you. And so will I." Henry wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm scared," he admitted. "That's okay," Clara said. "Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. But I've seen what you can do, Henry. I've seen your strength, your talent, your heart. You're going to be fine. More than fine. You're going to be amazing." They sat together for a long time. Not talking, just being there with each other. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Clara thought about how quickly time had passed, how just a few months ago she had been alone and broken, and how this small boy had changed everything. Before Henry left that night, he asked if he could play the piano one last time. Clara nodded, and they walked over to the bench together. Henry sat down and placed his fingers on the keys, but he didn't play the recital piece. Instead, he played something Clara had never heard before, a melody that was soft and sad, but also beautiful in a way that made her breath catch in her throat. "What is that?" she asked when he finished. "I wrote it," Henry said quietly. "For you. I've been working on it for a few weeks. I was going to play it at the recital as a surprise, but I want you to hear it now." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "What's it called?" Henry looked at her and smiled through his own tears. "I call it For Clara, because you're the first person who ever believed in me, and I don't want to forget that. Ever." Clara couldn't speak. She simply pulled him into another hug and held him as tightly as she could. When they finally let go, Henry stood up and walked to the door. He turned back one last time and said, "Thank you for everything." "Thank you," Clara replied, "for bringing music back into my life." Henry smiled, a small but real smile, and then he was gone. Clara stood at the door for a long time, watching the empty street. The house was quiet again, but this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt full of memories, full of love, full of a connection that distance could never break. She walked back to the piano and sat down on the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys and played Henry's song from memory. The notes floated through the room, filling every corner with warmth, and somewhere deep in her heart, Clara made a promise. No matter what happened, no matter how far apart they were, she would never stop believing in that boy. And she would never let the music die. 10 years passed. 10 years of seasons changing, of leaves falling and flowers blooming, of ordinary days stacking on top of each other until they became a lifetime. Clara was 82 now. Her hair had turned completely white, and she walked a little slower than she used to, but her eyes were still bright, and her spirit was still strong. She had never stopped playing the piano. Every morning, she would sit at the bench and let her fingers dance across the keys, filling the house with music just like she had done for most of her life. Sometimes, she played old classical pieces that reminded her of her teaching days. Sometimes, she played simple melodies that Teddy used to love. And sometimes, when she was feeling especially sentimental, she played the song that Henry had written for her all those years ago. She thought about him often. After he moved away with his foster family, they had stayed in touch for a while. Letters at first, then emails, then occasional phone calls. His foster parents were kind people who encouraged his music and supported his dreams. They bought him a real piano and enrolled him in lessons with a professional teacher. Henry thrived. He finished school with good grades, earned a scholarship to a music conservatory, and dedicated himself completely to his craft. Over the years, the communication became less frequent. Life got busy, as it always does. Henry was growing up, building his own path, becoming his own person. Clara understood. She never felt forgotten. She knew that some connections don't need constant contact to remain strong. Some bonds are woven so deeply into the heart that they never fade, no matter how much time passes. Still, she missed him. She missed his curious eyes and his gentle smile. She missed the way he used to sit beside her on the piano bench, soaking up every word she said. She missed watching him discover the magic of music for the first time. Those memories were precious to her, more valuable than gold. One autumn afternoon, Clara was sitting in her living room, reading a book, when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her daughters usually called before visiting, and she didn't get many other guests these days. Slowly, she got up and walked to the door. When she opened it, she found a young man standing on her porch. He was tall and handsome, dressed in a neat coat, with kind brown eyes that looked strangely familiar. He was holding a small envelope in his hands. "Can I help you?" Clara asked. The young man smiled. "Mrs. Clara," he said. Clara stared at him. Her heart began to pound. She looked closer at his face, at the shape of his eyes, at the way he stood, with his hands clasped in front of him. And then, like a wave crashing over her, she realized who he was. "Henry?" she whispered. He nodded, his smile growing wider. "It's been a long time." Clara's hands flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes instantly. She couldn't believe it. The small, shy boy who had wandered into her yard on a rainy afternoon was now a grown man, standing right in front of her. "Oh my goodness," she breathed. "Look at you. Just look at you." Henry stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her in a gentle hug. Clara held onto him tightly, afraid that if she let go, he might disappear again. "I'm sorry I didn't visit sooner," Henry said when they finally pulled apart. "Life got so busy, and I always thought I had more time. But I never forgot you. Not for a single day." "I know," Clara said, wiping her tears. "I never forgot you either." They went inside and sat in the living room, just like they used to do years ago. Henry told her everything. He told her about his foster family, about music school, about the struggles and triumphs of becoming a professional pianist. He told her about the competitions he had entered, the teachers he had studied with, the concerts he had performed. His life had been full and rich, shaped by hard work and dedication. And then he handed her the envelope. "What's this?" Clara asked. "Open it," Henry said. Clara carefully opened the envelope and pulled out what was inside. It was a ticket. A ticket to a concert at the Grand Symphony Hall downtown. The date was just 2 weeks away, and the name printed on the ticket made her gasp. It was Henry's name. He was the featured performer. "This is my debut concert," Henry explained. "My first solo performance with a full orchestra. I've been working toward this my whole life. And I want you to be there." Clara looked at the ticket, then back at Henry. "You want me to come?" "More than anything," Henry said. "None of this would have happened without you. You were the first person who saw something in me. You gave me a chance when no one else did. Everything I've accomplished started in this room, on that piano, with you sitting beside me." Clara didn't know what to say. She just held the ticket close to her heart and let the tears fall freely. 2 weeks later, Clara sat in the front row of the Symphony Hall. Her daughters were beside her, proud and curious to finally witness the connection their mother had described so many times. The hall was packed with hundreds of people, all dressed elegantly, all waiting with anticipation. When the lights dimmed and the curtain rose, Clara's breath caught in her throat. There he was, Henry, walking onto the stage in a black suit, looking calm and confident. He bowed to the audience, and the applause was thunderous. But before he sat down at the grand piano, he stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening," he said, his voice steady but warm. "Before I begin, I want to say a few words. Music saved my life. When I was a child, I had nothing. No family, no home, no hope. But then I met someone who changed everything. A woman who took me in, believed in me, and taught me that I was capable of beautiful things. She gave me the greatest gift anyone can give. She gave me a reason to believe in myself." He paused and looked directly at Clara. "This concert is dedicated to her. Mrs. Clara, thank you for everything. This is for you." The audience erupted in applause. Clara's daughters squeezed her hands. Clara herself could barely see through her tears. Henry sat down at the piano. He placed his fingers on the keys, and then he began to play. The opening notes were soft and familiar. Clara recognized them instantly. It was the song he had written for her 10 years ago, the song called For Clara. But now, it was bigger, fuller, richer. The orchestra joined in, swelling behind him, turning the simple melody into something magnificent. Clara closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. She thought about Teddy and how proud he would be. She thought about all the students she had taught over the years and how each one had carried a piece of her with them. She thought about the rainy afternoon when a small boy had wandered into her yard, looking for shelter, and had found so much more. The music filled the hall, touching every heart in the room. People wiped their eyes. Strangers held hands. For a few precious minutes, everyone in that space was connected by something invisible and powerful. When the final note faded into silence, the audience rose to their feet. The applause was deafening. But Clara barely heard it. She was looking at Henry, and he was looking at her. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. After the concert, they stood together backstage. Henry took her hands in his. "I told you I'd make you proud," he said. Clara smiled, her heart overflowing. "You always did," she replied. From the very first note. They hugged one last time. And Clara knew that this was what life was all about. Not the big achievements or the standing ovations, but the quiet moments of connection. The love we give and receive, the music that lives on long after we're gone. And as she walked out of the symphony hall that night, arm in arm with her daughters, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete and perfect peace. The piano had done its magic once again. A sound that touches hearts, echoing through time, reminding us all that we are never truly alone.